Hey, this is Tom Nash, and I promised I'll do a deep dive into the quarterly financials for General Motors. As you can see on the screen, this is the 10Qs filed July 26, 2022. And also on the screen right now, you'll see I have Teslas right here as well, just as a comparison. This is the Teslas, and we're going to use it side by side to show you how GM is doing relative to Tesla. Now, look, I'm just going to say it right here and right now. Tesla has its problems, and quite a lot, and I'm going to highlight them in this video. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And I think on the flip side of it, GM is really not being fairly analyzed by mainstream media. I think they're getting basically a free pass at this point. And all I want to do in this video is be completely fair and objective. So I've done a lot of work to prep for this video. So let me just show you the numbers and let the numbers speak for themselves. I'm not going to offer like any extra commentary, and I'm just going to give you the information and you decide for yourself. So look, let's start with the good stuff, right? As you can see right here, the automotive net sales for GM have increased by 9.5%. And I'm not being cynical here. This is not a bad thing. I mean, for a company like GM, which is a company that's not in growth stage, a 10% increase in the first 6 months of this year compared to the first 6 months of last year, it's not bad at all. I'm just being honest. I'm not being cynical. Not bad. However, and here's where I think the problem starts. If you look at their cost structure, there's where the trouble lies. If you look at the cost structure, you find out their cost of goods went up by 12%. If you look at here, SG&A went up by 22%. Things begin to look a little murkier. And if you look right here, a total blended rate of 11.5% increase in cost. So their costs are increasing at a faster pace than the revenues. So if you look right here, revenues are increasing at 9.5%, right? Costs are at 11.5%. You cannot be in business if your costs are rising faster than your revenues, because this is basically a surefire way to go out of business. And if you look at operating income right here, you'll see that it's down 30%. In the first half of last year, they had operating income of over $6 billion. And right now, they're over $4 billion. So operating income is being chewed up by this cost structure. 30% down. That's a big boo-boo. Now, how bad is this? Well, let me show you. This is actually I want to show you here. Tesla's, okay? So Tesla has a basically kind of like a mirror image of that. If you look at automotive sales, let's focus on automotive sales right here, right? So automotive sales for Tesla went up from 17.7 to 29.1. This is essentially a 65% increase in the first half of this year compared to the first half of last year. Now, total revenues are up 60%, so that's pretty much, because that's the most dominant part, so you would kind of expect that. However, and this is the problem for Tesla, Tesla is suffering from the same problems that GM is suffering. Things are more expensive. And as you can see, Tesla actually had an increase of 55% in their automotive sales costs. So basically the COGS, the cost of goods for automotive sales, went up by 55%. As you can see right here, I actually wrote it down. Similar problems. But to Tesla's defense, again, we have to show both sides of the coin, right? Tesla has the same problem. It's too expensive. Their margins are not that great. But Tesla is still, they can get a little break because they are ramping up 2 new factories. So that cuts into these margins quite significantly because, it's economies of scale. Once Berlin and Austin ramp up, we can actually see the real numbers here. But still, I'm going to say right now, still 60%, 55%. Still 60%, 55%. So clearly Tesla still has 5% more in growth of sales versus the growth of expenses. And if you look at cost of revenues right here, you'll see that it's up from 17.2 to 25.9. Again, massive increase, but because Tesla is growing faster in their sales compared to their costs, that's why you see gross profit increased by 90%, right? Went up from 5 to 9.6. Despite the increased cost. So that because, again, as long as you can grow your sales faster than your costs, this is what you're going to get. Now, if you look at income from operations, you remember when I showed you for GM how it's down 30%? In the first 6 months of last year, Tesla did $2 billion. That's from operations, income from operations. In the first 6 months of this year, Tesla did 6 billion. That's a 3x on their income from operations compared to the first half last year. So while GM is losing 30%, Tesla is just triple theirs. So just to show you the magnitude of the difference. Now let's scroll down and let's go to the balance sheet, because in the balance sheet, there's a lot of interesting things I want to show you. Now, GM is again has to take a beating here because it's clear. Look, their cash position as of the end of previous year was $20 billion. As of the end of the first half of this year, it's down to 16.7, 16% less cash. So they're bleeding cash, as you would expect with a company that's increasing their costs way faster than they should be, right? Now, let's focus on this thing right here. Now, this is where I want to give GM a pass. I think this would be unfair to attack them on increase in revenues, in the inventory, sorry. In the inventory section, you can look at GM and say, well, they had 13 billion in inventories by the end of last year. Now they have 17. Well, they can't move cars. Look, GM admittedly reported, that they said it. Hey, we're stuck with so many cars we can't sell because we're lacking, parts and raw materials to finish the cars because of the supply chain issues. But that is not a GM problem. That's a global automotive problem. In fact, Tesla suffers from the same problem, if not worse. If you actually go to Tesla's balance sheet, you'll see it quite clearly. So this is Tesla balance sheet. Let's go to assets. Let's go to inventory. So Tesla's inventory went up for the same period. End of last year, the first 6 months of this year went up from 5.7 billion to 8.1 billion. That's an increase of 40%. Even higher. GM only increased 30% of inventory. Tesla increased 40%. So Tesla is suffering from the same problems GM does. In fact, GM seems to be doing a better job at moving cars than Tesla because Tesla has way bigger inventory. At least like they're on par. So this inventory increase is going to cut away into the business, but it's not GM's fault. It's just the way the supply chains are. So this is not on them. Let's be fair about this. What is on them is the cost of their assets versus liabilities, because this is not as good as I even remembered myself. So if you look at Tesla, just for the comparison, let me show you. So this is Tesla. So Tesla is looking at, this is the balance sheet, at assets of 68 billion over liabilities of 30 billion, right? So that's 2.26. That's the ratio, 68 over 30. So they have more than twice more assets than liabilities. They're very stable. If there's any problems, they are easily able to repay their debt and whatnot, right? GM is in a whole different enchilada. So GM has way more assets, 253 billion. However, their ratio right here, as you can see, is 1.4. So they are not as bad as some companies. I mean, I've seen much, much, much worse, but 1.4 isn't amazing. It isn't something to write home about. The bigger problem is that if you look at their cash, they have 16 billion in cash and they have 16 billion in automotive debt alone. So just the automotive debt is basically 1-to-1 with their cash. Now, if you add in more liabilities they have, look, this is not really exactly a debt in the classical sense of the word. They have 62 billion, but that's GM Financial. That's part of their leasing business, financing business, but it's still a risk. I'm not going to include this in my calculation. So for me, the ratio for them is 1-to-1. But look, GM is still carrying GM Financial debt. It's 62 billion. And in this economy, a lot of people will default on auto loans. And this 62 billion will become a big problem for GM, even though it's not GM directly, it's GM Financial. But you understand, this is a major red flag. To carry so much money on your balance sheet of debt for auto payments from a lot of potential defaults this year, this is going to be a problem. So that's another red flag you need to be aware of, because they will not tell you this in mainstream media, right? If you add up like the 16 and the 62, and there's also right here 31 from GM Financial, like there's $92 billion in GM Financial debt on the books and another 16 from GM. So there's a lot of debt, over $100 billion in debt here. Now, if you go to Tesla, you see a huge difference. First of all, their debt is 2.9, and it's literally, it's let's say 3 billion, and they have 15 in cash. So, yeah, so sorry, they have how much? 17, 18. So they have 18 in cash. So that means they have 15 over. Yeah, okay, I got it. Yeah, so they have 15 billion more cash than debt, right? And if you look at it here, their debt in the previous 6 months of last year was 5.2. They're actually reducing their debt from 5.2 to 2.9, and they're increasing their cash from 17.5 to 18.3. Mild increase, only 4%, but still an increase. You remember, GM is down 16, Tesla is up 4%. Now, I showed you this part. Now look, And what else do we want to see here? I guess that's now. Let's go to the comparison table because this is very interesting. Before we do, I do want to show you something really interesting. I had it here. Yeah. Look, bro, this is not good. Net cash provided in operating activities. Net cash is down 38% for GM. I mean, this isn't brilliant. Let's see if we have anything else from GM, and then we'll go to the comparison table. I don't think we have anything else. Okay, let's go back to the comparison tables. Okay, so what I've done, I've actually prepared this Excel spreadsheet. And in this Excel spreadsheet, I'm going to use every single data point, GM versus Tesla, to show you the difference, the good and the bad. So first of all, GM, and let's be fair about it, is selling twice, maybe more than twice the vehicles of Tesla still. So GM has... in the second quarter of this year, GM sold 600,000 vehicles, right? Or close to 600,000 vehicles. Tesla only sold 250. So they're still making more vehicles. Let's be honest about it, okay? However, and here's where you see the problem. Okay, automotive revenues for the first 6 months of 2022, which means this year, compared to automotive revenues for the first 6 months of last year, okay? Okay, remember, this is GM. And this is Tesla, just so we can see it on the screen. Okay. So GM went from 59.8 to 65.4. They've increased their automotive revenues by 9.4%. We talked about it. Tesla increased theirs to 64, let's say 65%. But look at the numbers here. Okay? Tesla is currently at half the revenues of GM, right? But previous year, for the first 6 months, it was at approximately a 1/4. So they went from 1/4 of GM to 1/2 of GM in just a year. That's not an easy thing. It's because they're growing at 65%, not at 9.4. Now, this is the more interesting part. Look at the costs here. And this is really interesting. So the costs for the first 6 months of this year versus the first 6 months of last year. GM has increased their cost by 11.5%. First 6 months versus first 6 months. Tesla by 50%. From 17 to 26. However, because Tesla increased their sales by 65%, they're like all Gucci. GM actually is increasing costs faster than sales. That's not good. Now, here's where I'll show you why I think Tesla has already passed GM, even on the accounting side of things. Look, this is net income for the first 6 months of this year versus the first 6 months of last year. So let's look at the first 6 months of 2021. GM did almost 6 billion. Tesla did 1.6 billion. There's no comparison, right? GM just did 5.8 billion in net income. Tesla did 1.6. There's no comparison. 1 year later, GM is down 23% to 4.4. Tesla is up 238% to 5.5. So net income, not talking percentages, net income, Tesla has more net income than GM. Okay? They're selling half the vehicles. They're still not as big. They now have more net income than GM, and significantly more. And they're growing at an insane pace. Now, if you look at the cash right here again, Tesla is growing cash, GM is losing cash. Now, this is the part where it's really like risky. There's a lot of risk on the GM books because of the debt. Now, look, I've excluded the 62 million. That's the long term. If I add in the GM long term finance debt, it's another 32. So this is like a $94 billion debt. But let's exclude it just even without it. Look, GM is sitting 1-to-1. Their debt to cash ratio is 1.03, basically just enough to repay their debt. Tesla is at 6.3. Tesla has more than 6 times more cash than debt. You understand what kind of level of security it gives you as a company for bad times ahead? Again, look at the assets as well, right? Assets versus liabilities, right? 2.2. This is the ratio for Tesla. 1.4 for GM. However, and here's where I have to, show the flip side. All this is nice and dandy, but here's the real question right here. And this is for you to decide, not for me. The market cap, which is basically how much these companies are valued in the public market, GM is valued 16 times cheaper than Tesla. So it is what it is, right? So Tesla is valued at 800 billion. GM is at 50 billion. So the question is, based on everything you just seen, I think it's very hard to say that GM is a better company than Tesla. Obviously, Tesla seems like the way better company. But is this 16 times more company than GM? That's for you to decide. I don't know. I just showed you numbers. You decide. Comment below. Let me know what you think. And I'll see you guys in the next